One of the most frequent questions that I get, Nick, is that if these treatments are so good, why does my doctor not know them? Mm-hmm. And that's a good question. It really is a good question.
Yeah.
So what I try to do in the book is explain the why. Well, why does your doctor not know? So in order to do that, I have to go back to the Flexner report. Now, are you familiar with the Flexner report, Nick?
I'm not.
Okay. This is the most important history lesson that anybody that's listening to the show is going to get, because this explains why we are where we are. In 1910, the American Medical Association had undertaken a project to travel across the country and to rank medical schools and determine which ones were teaching sound medicine and which ones weren't. The project was going nowhere until they enlisted the help of Rockefeller and Carnegie, because they were running out of money. The AMA was actually a very impoverished organization at that time, and Rockefeller and Carnegie had deep pockets. So they agreed to fund this project to go ahead and rank all of the medical schools. The caveat was that they could set the criteria for the ranking. And so what did they do to set, what was their criteria to determine which medical schools were teaching sound medicine? Well, Carnegie and Rockefeller were tycoons, right? Rockefeller owned Standard Oil and several chemical companies at that time. He wanted to monopolize the chemical industry, which later became a pharmaceutical industry. His mantra, or his axiom that he lived by, was competition is a sin. So Rockefeller saw this as an opportunity to eliminate his competition in the chemical industry, and so did Carnegie. So what did they do? They hired Abraham Flexner, and based upon the recommendation of his brother Simon, who worked for Rockefeller at the Rockefeller Foundation. And they hired Abraham Flexner, who, along with the head of the American Medical Association's Council on Medical Education, traveled across the country to rank medical schools. Now, the interesting thing, Nick, was that Flexner admittedly knew nothing about medicine, but he's the guy that's ranking medical schools. Well, how could he do that? Well, they had very simple guidelines. The medical schools that were teaching drug-intensive medicine, they got high marks. And the homeopaths and the chiropractics, the schools that were teaching homeopathy and chiropractic and naturalism and herbalism, they got low marks. In the end, Flexner submitted this report to the Carnegie Foundation, and eventually it made its way to Congress, and the AMA became the new gatekeeper for what was considered to be accredited medical education in the United States. And so what did this report do? It promulgated the pushing of drugs in medical school as sound medicine, because that was what was the predetermined outcome. Rockefeller and Carnegie wanted to monopolize the chemical industries, and they did that with the Flexner report. So now, based upon the Flexner report and its recommendations, those medical schools that were teaching drug-intensive medicine received funding from Carnegie and Rockefeller. In 1910, when the Flexner report was submitted to Congress, they were awarded $550 million, those medical schools that taught drug-intensive medicine. Now, in today's dollars, that's the equivalent of $20 billion of funding.
Wow.
So, of course, the medical schools that received the funding, they were the ones that lasted. And those medical schools that were teaching herbalism and homeopathy and chiropractic and were producing naturopaths, they fell by the wayside. And so now, because of that alliance between big business and the AMA 100 years ago, the only medical schools that are left are those that are teaching drug-intensive medicine, because one of the strings that was attached to the money is they had to continue teaching drug-intensive medicine to receive this funding back in 1910. So that's why we are where we are. That's why your doctor knows nothing about naturopathy or herbalism or chiropractic, and that's why they're called quackery, because in 1913, the AMA set up a propaganda department that was the main intention of the propaganda department within the AMA was to demonize anybody that was still teaching homeopathy and herbalism and chiropractic, and to label them as quacks. And so that is why your doctor knows nothing about nutrition, knows nothing about natural treatments. That's why your doctor will call someone like me a quack, or someone like Dr. Nick Gonzalez a quack, or someone like Dr. Stanislaw Brzezinski a quack, because they've been taught to do that in medical school, because the medical schools are funded now largely by pharmaceutical money, and they were those medical schools 100 years ago received their funding from the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, and in order to remain on the good list with that money, in order to keep the funding coming, they had to continue teaching drug-intensive medicine.